Three women walked into the night. Only their shadows remain. On October 15, 2023, Sarah Chen, Monica Rivera, and Jessica Walsh left a birthday party at 11:47 p.m. By sunrise, they had vanished without a trace, except for one haunting clue that would send investigators down a rabbit hole darker than anyone could imagine. Before we dive into this mystery, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you think happened. Your opinion could be the key to understanding this story. The evening had started like any other Saturday night in suburban Denver. At 1247 Maple Street, the Colonial House buzzed with celebration. Colored lights cast dancing shadows on 30-something professionals, their wine glasses catching the glow. Sarah Chen, 28, stood near the kitchen island, her black dress shimmering under pendant lights. The smell of appetizers mixed with expensive perfumes and cigarette smoke from the patio. Monica Rivera, 31, nursed red wine while showing vacation photos on her phone. Her gold bracelet clinked against her glass. As a nurse at Denver General, nights off were rare. Tonight felt like rebellion. Jessica Walsh had driven up from Colorado Springs for this party. At 29, between jobs and escaping a recent breakup, she moved through the crowd with nervous energy, heels clicking against hardwood floors. None knew each other well. Sarah and Monica worked for the same company, different departments. Jessica was practically a stranger. Yet, they found themselves drawn together by social magnetism. Three women sharing restless energy, needing to extend the evening longer. The party wound down around 11:30 p.m., but Sarah, Monica, and Jessica weren't ready for it to end. "There's this place downtown," Jessica said. 24-hour diner. Incredible pancakes. Monica checked her phone. "I don't work until Monday." Sarah hesitated, thinking about yoga class, then shrugged. "Why not?" At exactly 11:47 p.m., security cameras captured the three women walking toward Jessica's silver Honda Civic. Sarah carried a small black purse. Monica had a brown leather handbag. Jessica jingled her keys, the metallic sound sharp in the quiet air. The last image shows Jessica opening the driver's door, interior light illuminating all three faces briefly. They looked happy, carefree, unaware they were about to disappear into a mystery that would haunt investigators for months. The car pulled away at 11:48 p.m., taillights fading into darkness. They never made it to the diner. But what investigators found the next morning would be far more disturbing than a simple missing persons case. What they discovered would suggest these three women hadn't just vanished. They had stumbled into something much more sinister, something that had been waiting for them in the dark. Sunday morning brought gray clouds and the kind of silence that makes suburban neighborhoods feel haunted. At 6:23 a.m., jogger Marcus Thompson followed his usual route down Riverside Trail, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp October air. The trail curved alongside Cherry Creek, where fallen leaves created a carpet of gold and crimson. The water moved slowly, carrying the earthy smell of autumn decay. Marcus had run this path for 3 years, but something felt different today. Wrong. There, wedged between two rocks near the water's edge, a small black purse caught his eye. Marcus stopped, his running shoes crunching on gravel. The purse looked expensive, leather with silver hardware that glinted despite the overcast sky. It sat at an odd angle, as if it had been tossed rather than dropped. Water lapped gently at one corner, darkening the material. He pulled out his phone and called 911. Detective Ray Martinez arrived 40 minutes later, his weathered face already showing the weight of what would become the most complex case of his 20-year career. He crouched beside the purse, careful not to disturb the scene. The contents had spilled partially. Lipstick, car keys, a wallet with Sarah Chen's driver's license visible through the plastic window. But it was what wasn't there that troubled him most. No phone, no signs of struggle, no indication of how the purse had traveled from downtown Denver, where the diner was located, to this quiet creek nearly 15 miles away. The forensics team arrived as morning joggers began gathering behind yellow tape. Curious faces peered through the trees, whispering theories about the abandoned purse. Detective Martinez watched them photograph every angle, dust for prints, collect water samples. Dr. Amanda Foster, the county's lead forensic specialist, examined the purse with methodical precision. Her gloved hands revealed more questions than answers. The leather showed no tears, no blood, no obvious signs of violence. Yet the positioning suggested it hadn't simply fallen from someone's hands. "Interesting," she murmured, holding the wallet up to the light. Inside Sarah's wallet, everything remained pristine. Credit cards aligned perfectly. $43 in cash, undisturbed. A photo of Sarah with her parents tucked behind her insurance card. But her phone was missing, and more disturbing, so were Monica and Jessica. The Honda Civic had vanished completely. No traffic cameras had captured its path after leaving Maple Street. No cell phone pings after 11:52 p.m. 3 women and a car had simply evaporated into the night, leaving only this single, carefully placed clue. Detective Martinez stared at the creek, watching leaves drift downstream. In his experience, purses didn't travel 15 miles on their own. Someone had brought it here, someone who wanted it found. But why Sarah's purse specifically? What had happened to Monica and Jessica? And most unsettling of all, why did this feel less like evidence and more like a message? The questions multiplied faster than the answers, and Detective Martinez had the distinct feeling he was being pulled into something much larger than a missing persons case. Something orchestrated. The search for Jessica's Honda Civic began at dawn on Monday. Detective Martinez coordinated with state police, expanding the search radius to encompass 3 counties. Every parking lot, every abandoned road, every secluded area where a silver sedan might be hidden. Nothing. The car had vanished as completely as the 3 women inside it. But modern vehicles don't simply disappear. They leave digital footprints, electronic breadcrumbs that investigators can follow. Martinez knew this, which made the absolute silence even more disturbing. Sarah's parents drove up from Grand Junction that morning, their faces etched with the particular kind of terror that comes with waiting. David and Linda Chen sat in the police station's consultation room, surrounded by the fluorescent lighting and institutional beige walls that seemed designed to drain hope. Linda clutched a recent photo of Sarah, her fingers trembling slightly. David stared at the floor, his jaw clenched with the helpless rage of a father who couldn't protect his daughter. They spoke in quiet voices about Sarah's routine, her friends, her habits. Nothing seemed unusual. No enemies, no dangerous relationships, no reason someone would want to harm her. Meanwhile, Monica's colleague from Denver General painted a similar picture. Monica Rivera was described as reliable, caring, someone who stayed late to comfort worried families. She had no known connections to Sarah or Jessica beyond that single evening. Her apartment showed no signs of disturbance. Plants watered, bills paid, laundry folded and waiting in a basket. Jessica's story proved more complicated. Recently unemployed, recently single, she'd been staying with friends in Colorado Springs. Her ex-boyfriend, contacted by police, seemed genuinely shocked by her disappearance. He provided an alibi. He'd been at a company retreat in Vail, surrounded by witnesses. But Jessica's bank records revealed something interesting. 3 large cash withdrawals in the past month, totaling nearly $2,000. When asked, her friends couldn't explain the withdrawals. Jessica hadn't mentioned needing money, hadn't talked about financial problems. Detective Martinez studied the timeline, looking for patterns. 3 women who barely knew each other, linked by nothing more than a chance encounter at a party. Yet, someone had specifically targeted them. Or had they stumbled into something by accident? The forensics report on Sarah's purse arrived Tuesday morning. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed microscopic traces of industrial cleaning solvent on the leather, the kind used in commercial settings. More intriguingly, embedded in the purse's stitching were tiny fragments of what appeared to be concrete dust and motor oil. This suggested the purse had been in some kind of warehouse or industrial facility before ending up at Cherry Creek. But which facility? Denver's industrial district encompassed hundreds of buildings, most legitimate businesses operating during daylight hours. Martinez spent Tuesday afternoon driving through the industrial sector, noting the sprawling complexes of manufacturing plants, shipping companies, and storage facilities. Any one of them could hide a silver Honda Civic. Any one of them could hold 3 missing women. As evening approached, he received a call that changed everything. A security guard at Hartwell Industries, a chemical processing plant on the outskirts of Denver, reported unusual activity over the weekend. Lights in a supposedly empty building, vehicles coming and going at odd hours. When Martinez arrived at Hartwell Industries, he found a facility that had been closed for renovation for 6 months. The parking lot was empty, the windows dark, yet fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the asphalt, and the security guard's logs showed multiple unexplained entries. Standing in that empty parking lot, Martinez felt the case shift beneath his feet. This wasn't random. 3 women hadn't simply disappeared. They'd been taken to a specific place by people who knew exactly what they were doing. But what were they doing? And more importantly, were Sarah, Monica, and Jessica still alive? The security footage from Hartwell Industries told a story that Detective Martinez hadn't expected. Saturday night, 1:17 a.m., nearly 2 hours after the 3 women left the party, a dark SUV pulled into the empty parking lot. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the grainy black and white feed. 2 figures emerged from the vehicle, their faces obscured by shadows and the low resolution of the decade-old camera system. They moved with purpose, not like criminals trying to hide, but like people who belonged there. One carried what appeared to be a briefcase. The other dragged something heavy from the SUV's rear compartment. Martinez watched the footage 3 times, his coffee growing cold as he tried to identify any distinguishing features. The figures disappeared into Building C, a sprawling structure that housed the facility's main processing equipment. 23 minutes later, they emerged empty-handed and drove away. No sign of Jessica's Honda Civic. No indication that 3 women had been brought to this location. Yet, the industrial cleaning solvent on Sarah's purse suggested otherwise. Building C remained locked, its windows painted black from the inside. According to Hartwell Industries' project manager, the building was scheduled for complete renovation and hadn't been accessed since August. Yet, the security logs showed multiple entries over the past 3 months, entries that weren't supposed to exist. Dr. Foster arrived with her forensics team Tuesday afternoon. They found traces of the same cleaning solvent near the building's rear entrance, along with tire tracks that matched the measurements of a Honda Civic. But more disturbing were the scuff marks on the concrete, parallel lines that suggested something had been dragged across the ground. Inside Building C, the air hung thick with the smell of chemicals and something else, something organic that made Martinez's stomach clench. Industrial equipment loomed in the darkness, covered by plastic tarps. The forensics team's flashlights created dancing shadows on the walls, revealing a space that felt more like a tomb than a factory. They found Jessica's car keys first, tucked behind a piece of machinery as if someone had dropped them in haste. Then Monica's earrings, small gold studs that had apparently been torn away. Each piece of evidence told part of a story, but the complete narrative remained maddeningly elusive. The breakthrough came when Dr. Foster discovered something unexpected in the building's ventilation system. Wedged inside an air duct, barely visible without specialized equipment, was a cell phone. Sarah's cell phone, its screen cracked but still functional. The phone's call log revealed the last communication any of the 3 women had made. At 12:04 a.m. Sunday morning, Sarah had sent a single text message to a number that didn't exist in her contacts. "We're here. Something's wrong. Help!" The message was never completed, never sent. Martinez stared at the incomplete text, feeling the weight of those unfinished words. Sarah had realized something was wrong. She'd tried to call for help, but someone had stopped her before she could finish typing. The phone's GPS data showed the device's final location as Building C, but more importantly, it revealed the route they'd taken to get there. Jessica's Honda Civic had indeed headed toward downtown Denver after leaving the party, But instead of reaching the 24-hour diner, the car had taken several unexpected turns. Someone had redirected them. Either Jessica had changed her mind about their destination, or someone else had taken control of the situation. As Martinez studied the GPS route, a chilling pattern emerged. The car had stopped at 3 different locations between the party and Hartwell Industries. Brief stops, just a few minutes each. The kind of stops someone might make if they were following instructions, or if they were being coerced. But what really happened during those stops? Who had contacted them? And most urgently, where were Sarah, Monica, and Jessica now? Standing in the shadowy interior of Building C, surrounded by the detritus of interrupted lives, Martinez realized he wasn't just investigating a disappearance anymore. He was investigating an abduction. The 3 GPS stops painted a map of deliberate action. Detective Martinez stood before the whiteboard in the investigation room, red pins marking each location where Jessica's Honda Civic had paused on its fatal journey. Stop 1, a 24-hour gas station on Colfax Avenue. Security cameras showed the Honda pulling up to pump number 7 at 12:11 a.m. Jessica had gotten out alone, her movements appearing normal to casual observers. But something in her body language, the way she glanced repeatedly at her phone, the nervous adjustment of her hair, suggested she was following instructions. Stop 2, the parking lot of a closed electronics store. No cameras, no witnesses, just GPS coordinates showing the vehicle remained stationary for 7 minutes. Whatever happened during those 7 minutes had left no trace except for the digital breadcrumb of Sarah's incomplete text message. Stop 3, a residential street in a middle-class neighborhood. The Honda had sat under a broken streetlight for 4 minutes before continuing to Hartwell Industries. Residents in the area reported nothing unusual, but one detail caught Martinez's attention. The house directly across from where the car had stopped was for sale, vacant for 3 months. Wednesday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Jessica's bank had flagged suspicious activity on her account. Someone had attempted to use her debit card at an ATM in Phoenix, Arizona, nearly 800 miles from Denver. The attempted withdrawal had failed due to insufficient funds, but the transaction had triggered the bank's security system. More importantly, it suggested that whoever had taken the 3 women was now far from Colorado, possibly attempting to create false trails to confuse investigators. Martinez contacted Phoenix police, but his instincts told him this was misdirection. Real kidnappers wouldn't be so careless with electronic evidence. Someone wanted investigators looking southwest, while the actual crime remained local. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Foster's analysis of the concrete dust found on Sarah's purse revealed something remarkable. It wasn't from Hartwell Industries. The chemical composition matched a different type of industrial facility entirely, one that processed rare earth minerals. Only 3 such facilities operated within a reasonable distance of Denver. 2 were fully operational with multiple witnesses and security systems. The third, Meridian Processing, had been operating under limited capacity since a workplace accident 6 months earlier. Meridian Processing occupied a sprawling complex east of the city, surrounded by chain-link fencing and warning signs about hazardous materials. Unlike Hartwell Industries, Meridian showed signs of recent activity: fresh tire tracks, disturbed gravel, the lingering smell of diesel fuel in the air. The facility's manager, Robert Kellerman, met Martinez at the main gate with nervous energy that immediately raised suspicions. Kellerman's explanations for recent activity seemed rehearsed, his answers to direct questions oddly specific, yet ultimately uninformative. "We've had some contractors doing safety assessments," Kellerman explained, his hands fidgeting with a set of keys, required by the state after the accident. But when Martinez requested documentation for these contractor visits, Kellerman claimed the paperwork was at the main office in Colorado Springs. When asked about specific contractors, he provided names that didn't exist in any business registry. More telling was what Martinez observed during his tour of the facility. Building 7, supposedly closed since the workplace accident, showed clear signs of recent occupancy. Fresh coffee cups in the break room, recently used equipment. Most disturbing of all, scratches on the concrete floor that looked suspiciously like the marks found at Hartwell Industries. As Martinez prepared to leave, a maintenance worker approached him discreetly. Tom Weaver had worked at Meridian for 15 years, and his weathered face showed the concern of a man who'd seen something he couldn't ignore. "There's been weird stuff happening at night," Weaver whispered, glancing toward Kellerman. "Vehicles coming and going when they shouldn't, and sounds from Building 7. Sounds like people." Martinez felt the case crystallizing around him. 3 women hadn't just disappeared. They'd been taken by people with access to industrial facilities. People who understood how to move victims without leaving traces. People who were part of something larger than a simple abduction. But what was the connection? Why these 3 women? And most urgently, were they still at Meridian Processing, or had they been moved again? Standing in the parking lot of the mineral processing facility, Martinez realized he wasn't just hunting kidnappers anymore. He was uncovering a network. Thursday brought rain and a revelation that shattered Detective Martinez's understanding of the case. The maintenance worker, Tom Weaver, had agreed to meet at a diner 20 miles from Meridian Processing, his hands shaking as he stirred sugar into black coffee. "They're not just storing stuff," Weaver whispered. "They're moving people. I've seen women being transferred between vehicles, always at night, always quiet." Martinez felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't about Sarah, Monica, and Jessica alone. They had stumbled into a trafficking operation that had been running for months beneath the cover of industrial renovation. Weaver's description matched security footage from 3 other facilities around Colorado. The network extended far beyond Denver, using abandoned factories as perfect cover for moving victims without detection. The transfers happened on weekend nights when security was minimal. Saturday night activities that coincided exactly with when 3 women had vanished after a birthday party. Friday morning brought FBI involvement. Agent Sarah Kim arrived from the Denver field office, her expertise in human trafficking cases immediately evident as she studied the evidence board. "This is bigger than we thought," she confirmed, pointing to patterns Martinez had begun to recognize. "We've been tracking similar disappearances across 4 states. Young women, taken opportunistically, moved through industrial facilities." The scope was staggering. At least 15 women had vanished under similar circumstances over the past year. All appeared unrelated until viewed through the lens of interstate trafficking. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica weren't random victims. They were the latest additions to a sophisticated operation. But Agent Kim's next revelation changed everything again. The trafficking ring wasn't just moving women. They were supplying them to specific buyers. Wealthy clients who paid premium prices for victims with particular characteristics. All 3 women fit a specific profile that commanded high prices in illegal markets. Standing in the rain outside the diner, Martinez realized the case had evolved beyond rescue into something much darker. They weren't just looking for 3 missing women anymore. They were racing against a clock that determined whether Sarah, Monica, and Jessica would be found alive. The surveillance operation began Saturday night, exactly 1 week after the disappearance. Martinez and Agent Kim positioned themselves in an unmarked van half a mile from Meridian Processing, night vision equipment trained on Building 7. The facility appeared dead, but appearances deceived. At 11:43 p.m., 2 black SUVs approached from the east entrance, their headlights cutting through the darkness. The vehicles moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Through thermal imaging, Martinez watched figures emerge from the SUVs. 4 men, possibly armed, moving toward Building 7 with military precision. They disappeared inside, leaving only the ghostly heat signatures on his screen. "Transport night," Agent Kim whispered into her radio, alerting backup units stationed at strategic points around the complex. 37 minutes later, the men emerged. But now they weren't alone. Thermal imaging revealed additional figures, smaller, moving differently. Women being escorted, their body language suggesting fear or sedation. Martinez gripped his binoculars tighter, hoping against hope to catch a glimpse of Sarah, Monica, or Jessica. The distance and darkness made identification impossible, but the reality was undeniable. The trafficking operation was active, and victims were being moved. The SUVs departed in different directions, splitting the cargo between vehicles. One headed north toward Wyoming. The other went south, likely toward New Mexico. Classic misdirection that would make following both impossible with current resources. Agent Kim made the call that Martinez dreaded. We follow the north vehicle. Alert New Mexico State Police about the southbound SUV. But what if they chose wrong? What if Sarah, Monica, and Jessica were in the vehicle heading south while they pursued empty leads north? The chase lasted 3 hours through winding mountain roads, the FBI's surveillance team maintaining careful distance to avoid detection. The SUV's destination became clear as it approached the Wyoming border. Another industrial facility, another link in the trafficking chain. By dawn, they had mapped another node in the network. But the 3 women Martinez desperately wanted to save remained ghosts, moved through a system designed to make people disappear forever. Standing in a truck stop parking lot as the sun rose over the mountains, Martinez felt the weight of failure. They were always one step behind, always reacting instead of predicting. But Agent Kim's phone buzzed with intelligence that changed everything. The New Mexico team had successfully tracked the southbound vehicle to its destination, and they'd found something unexpected. A list. A ledger containing names, descriptions, and prices paid for dozens of victims over the past 2 years. Sarah Chen, Monica Rivera, and Jessica Walsh were all listed. But they weren't marked as delivered. They were marked as inventory pending transfer. Somewhere in this vast network of industrial facilities and criminal contacts, 3 women were still waiting, still alive, still rescuable. The ledger found in New Mexico revealed a trafficking network spanning 6 states, with Meridian Processing serving as a central hub. Agent Kim spread the pages across a conference table in the Denver FBI field office, each entry representing a life stolen, a family destroyed. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica appeared on page 12, listed with clinical efficiency, ages, physical descriptions, and disturbing notations about their marketability. The entry was dated October 16th, the day after their disappearance, but remained unmarked for final disposition. Pending transfer meant they were being held somewhere, waiting for buyers or transport to a final destination. The typical window for such operations was 10 to 14 days, giving Martinez a terrifyingly narrow timeline. The network operated through a rotation system. Victims were moved between facilities every few days to prevent law enforcement from pinpointing locations. Based on the ledger's patterns, Sarah, Monica, and Jessica should have been moved at least twice since their initial capture. Agent Kim cross-referenced facility locations with recent surveillance reports. 3 possibilities emerged: an abandoned meat processing plant in Kansas, a defunct auto manufacturing complex in New Mexico, or a shuttered chemical plant back in Colorado. The Colorado facility, Apex Chemical, sat 40 miles northeast of Denver. The company had declared bankruptcy 8 months earlier, leaving behind a sprawling industrial complex perfect for clandestine operations. More importantly, Apex Chemical's former security contractor was the same company that had installed systems at both Hartwell Industries and Meridian Processing. Martinez felt the pieces clicking together. Someone inside the security company had been providing access to abandoned facilities, creating a ready-made network of safe houses for trafficking operations. Sunday morning brought a breakthrough. Surveillance at Apex Chemical detected unusual activity. Multiple vehicles, generator-powered lighting, and most significantly, cellular communications from inside a supposedly empty building. The communications were encrypted, but their frequency suggested coordination of a major operation. Either the traffickers were preparing to move inventory, or they were responding to increased law enforcement pressure. Time was running out. Agent Kim assembled a tactical team, while Martinez coordinated with local authorities. The plan was surgical: simultaneous raids on all suspected facilities to prevent the traffickers from scattering their victims or eliminating evidence. But as they prepared for the coordinated strike, Martinez received a call that changed everything. Tom Weaver, the maintenance worker who had first revealed the trafficking operation, was found dead in his apartment. Official cause: apparent suicide. Unofficial reality: elimination of a witness who knew too much. The traffickers were cleaning house, which meant they were either preparing to shut down operations or escalate to a new level of violence. Either scenario put Sarah, Monica, and Jessica in immediate mortal danger. Standing outside Weaver's apartment building, Martinez realized they weren't just racing against a timetable anymore. They were racing against killers who had decided that witnesses, including victims, were expendable. The game had changed. Now it was life or death. Monday, 4:30 a.m. The tactical team assembled in darkness 2 miles from Apex Chemical, their black vehicles invisible against the pre-dawn sky. Martinez wore borrowed tactical gear. His detective's badge, the only indication he didn't belong among the federal agents preparing for breach. Agent Kim's briefing was concise and brutal. Intelligence suggested at least 8 victims were being held inside the facility, with unknown numbers of armed guards. The building's industrial structure provided multiple escape routes and countless places to hide or eliminate evidence. Remember, Kim addressed the team, these people have already killed to protect their operation. They won't hesitate to kill again. The approach began at 4:47 a.m., teams moving through the industrial complex with practiced silence. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures clustered in the facility's northeast corner. Building C, a former chemical storage warehouse with minimal windows and reinforced walls. Martinez followed the breach team, his heart pounding as they approached the main entrance. Through the tactical radio, he heard confirmations from teams positioned at secondary exits. No one would escape this net. The door exploded inward at exactly 5:08 a.m. Federal agents! Everyone on the ground! The scene inside Building C defied Martinez's worst expectations. The warehouse had been converted into a makeshift detention facility, with shipping containers modified into cells. The smell hit him immediately. Fear, unwashed bodies, and the distinctive odor of human desperation. Gunfire erupted from the facility's rear section as guards tried to escape through service tunnels. The tactical team moved with lethal efficiency, securing suspects while medics rushed toward the containers. Martinez followed the medics, dreading what they might find. The first container held 2 women, barely conscious, chained to metal rings welded into the walls. Neither was Sarah, Monica, or Jessica. The second container was empty, but showed recent occupancy. Blankets, food containers, and most chilling scratches on the metal walls, where someone had tried to keep track of time. The third container's lock had been recently changed, the metal still bright where new hardware had been installed. Agent Kim's team cut through it with bolt cutters, the sound echoing through the warehouse like a death knell. Inside, Martinez found them. Sarah Chen sat against the far wall, her party dress now torn and filthy, her eyes showing the hollow stare of trauma. Monica Rivera was unconscious but breathing, her nurse's training apparently having kept her focused on survival. Jessica Walsh was trying to comfort Sarah, whispering reassurances despite her own obvious terror. "It's over," Martinez told them, his voice breaking with relief and rage. "You're safe now." But even as paramedics worked to assess the women's condition, Martinez knew the nightmare wasn't over. The facility held evidence of a trafficking operation that had processed dozens of victims. Computer records showed buyers from multiple countries, prices that defied human decency, and transportation routes that spanned continents. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica were alive, but they were only 3 survivors among countless others who hadn't been so fortunate. The ledger found in Building C's office contained names dating back 2 years, names of women who would never go home. As the 3 women were loaded into ambulances, Martinez caught sight of the final, most disturbing evidence, a shipping manifest dated for that very day, showing 8 victims scheduled for export to buyers in Eastern Europe. They had arrived just hours before the most valuable inventory was to be shipped overseas forever. But who were the buyers? Who had enough money and influence to sustain such an operation? And, most troubling of all, how many other facilities like this existed, hidden behind the facades of legitimate businesses? The rescue was complete, but the investigation was just beginning. The computers seized from Apex Chemical contained terabytes of encrypted data that would take FBI analysts weeks to fully decode. But within hours, they had uncovered enough to reveal the true scope of the trafficking network that had nearly claimed Sarah, Monica, and Jessica. The operation wasn't run by common criminals. Financial records showed transactions involving shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore. The money trail led to legitimate businesses, respected individuals, and most shocking of all, people in positions of public trust. Agent Kim presented the findings to Martinez in a secure conference room. The evidence spread across multiple screens like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that revealed a picture too horrifying to fully comprehend. "We're looking at a multi-million-dollar operation," Kim explained, pointing to financial analyses. "The buyers aren't street-level criminals. These are wealthy individuals who can afford to pay 6-figure sums for specific victims." The client list read like a who's who of society's elite: business executives, foreign diplomats, entertainment industry figures, all connected by their willingness to purchase human beings for their private use. The trafficking ring had operated like an exclusive boutique, providing merchandise to customers who believed their money made them untouchable. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. Among the seized communications, FBI analysts discovered messages from someone identified only as the facilitator, an individual who appeared to coordinate the entire operation from behind layers of anonymity. The facilitator's messages revealed intimate knowledge of law enforcement procedures, suggesting someone with inside access to police investigations. Worse, several communications indicated advanced warning about planned raids on other facilities, allowing traffickers to relocate victims before law enforcement arrived. Martinez felt sick as the implications became clear. Someone within law enforcement, possibly someone he knew, someone he trusted, had been feeding information to the traffickers. The system designed to protect victims had been corrupted from within. The investigation took a personal turn when Martinez discovered that the facilitator had detailed knowledge of his own investigative methods. Messages referenced his interview techniques, his travel patterns, even his preference for meeting informants at specific locations. "They've been watching you," Agent Kim confirmed grimly, "possibly since the beginning of this case." The realization hit Martinez like a physical blow. Every move he'd made, every lead he'd followed, had been monitored and potentially compromised. The traffickers hadn't stayed ahead of the investigation through luck. They'd had inside information every step of the way. But who was the facilitator? The encrypted messages provided no direct identification, only behavioral patterns that suggested someone with decades of law enforcement experience and high-level access to ongoing investigations. The search for the facilitator would require investigating Martinez's own colleagues, questioning loyalties built over years of shared cases and mutual trust. Someone in his department, or in the FBI, had sold their soul for trafficking profits. As Martinez left the FBI field office that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every colleague who greeted him, every superior who asked about the case, became a potential suspect. The institution he'd served faithfully for 20 years had been infiltrated by someone willing to facilitate the enslavement of innocent women. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica were safe, recovering in a secure medical facility under federal protection. But their rescue had exposed a corruption that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement itself. The puppet masters weren't just wealthy clients buying human misery. They included someone sworn to protect and serve, someone who had betrayed that oath for money and power. The hunt for the facilitator had begun. The internal investigation began with psychological profiles and financial audits of every law enforcement officer who had accessed information about the trafficking case. Martinez found himself scrutinizing colleagues he'd worked alongside for years, looking for signs of deception in familiar faces. Agent Kim established a secure communication protocol, operating under the assumption that normal channels had been compromised. Their investigation into the facilitator proceeded in secret, with information shared only among a handful of trusted personnel. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah Chen, during her recovery debriefing, mentioned something that had seemed insignificant at the time. During her captivity, she'd overheard guards discussing the cop who provided updates about police activities. "They knew you were getting close," Sarah told Martinez during a secure video conference. One of them said the cop had warned them about surveillance at Meridian Processing. Martinez felt his blood chill. Only 5 people had known about the Meridian surveillance operation in advance. The circle of potential suspects had narrowed dramatically, but each possibility felt like a personal betrayal. The financial audit revealed something disturbing. Over the past 18 months, 3 officers in Martinez's department had made purchases or investments that exceeded their legitimate income. New cars, home improvements, unexplained cash deposits, all within the time frame of the trafficking operation's most active period. But financial irregularities weren't proof of corruption. Martinez needed direct evidence linking someone to communications with the trafficking network. The FBI's computer forensics team began analyzing seized communications equipment, looking for digital fingerprints that would identify the facilitator. The answer came in the form of metadata embedded in encrypted messages. Despite sophisticated attempts to hide the sender's identity, computer timestamps revealed that several messages had been sent during specific shifts when only one officer had access to the relevant case information. Detective Lieutenant Carl Weber, Martinez's own supervisor, a 25-year veteran of the force whom Martinez had considered a mentor and friend. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Weber had accessed case files immediately before each communication from the facilitator. His work schedule aligned perfectly with message timestamps. Most damning of all, Weber had been the one who initially assigned Martinez to the missing persons case, potentially positioning himself to monitor the investigation from the beginning. Agent Kim coordinated with Internal Affairs to set up surveillance on Weber without alerting him to the investigation. They needed direct proof of communication with trafficking networks, evidence that would stand up in federal court. The sting operation began on Thursday morning. Martinez, wearing a wire and followed by surveillance teams, briefed Weber on fictional intelligence about a new trafficking facility. If Weber was the facilitator, he would pass this information to his criminal contacts within hours. "We've identified another warehouse," Martinez lied smoothly, watching Weber's face for any reaction. "Industrial District, Building 47 on Commerce Street. Intelligence suggests they're moving high-value inventory tomorrow night." Weber's expression remained neutral, professional. But Martinez noticed something in his supervisor's eyes, a flicker of calculation that hadn't been there before. Within 3 hours, surveillance teams detected encrypted communications from Weber's personal devices. The messages matched the digital signatures of previous facilitator communications, providing the direct evidence needed for arrest. But Weber wasn't just passing information to traffickers. The intercepted messages revealed something far more sinister. Weber was actively participating in victim selection, using police databases to identify vulnerable women who wouldn't be immediately missed by family or friends. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica hadn't been random victims. They'd been specifically targeted because Weber's intelligence suggested they fit the profile of women who could disappear without generating immediate public attention. Standing in the police station where he'd worked for 2 decades, Martinez realized that the corruption ran deeper than financial gain. Weber hadn't just sold information. He'd become an active predator, using his badge and authority to feed victims to a network that treated human beings like merchandise. The arrest would come tomorrow. But tonight, Martinez sat in his empty office, wondering how many other victims might have been saved if he'd recognized the betrayal sooner. How many women had paid the price for his misplaced trust? Friday morning arrived with the weight of betrayal hanging over the Denver Police Department. At 6:15 a.m., federal agents entered Lieutenant Carl Weber's office, their voices cutting through the usual morning routine like a blade through silk. Carl Weber, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, racketeering, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Martinez watched from across the bullpen as his mentor, the man who had taught him interrogation techniques, who had been best man at his wedding, who had been a trusted friend for 15 years, was handcuffed and read his rights. Weber's face showed no surprise, only resigned acceptance. He'd known this moment was coming, had probably been preparing for it since the Apex chemical raid revealed how deeply investigators had penetrated the trafficking network. "I want a lawyer," Weber said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent police station. The ripple effects were immediate and devastating. Every case Weber had supervised, every investigation he'd influenced, would need to be reviewed for potential corruption. Dozens of criminal prosecutions could be compromised. Public trust in the department would take years to rebuild. But the most chilling discovery came from Weber's personal files. FBI agents found detailed profiles of at least 30 women, complete with addresses, work schedules, and vulnerability assessments. Sarah, Monica, and Jessica were just the most recent names on a list that stretched back 2 years. The profiles revealed Weber's methodology with sickening clarity. He'd identified women with limited family connections, irregular work schedules, or recent life changes that made them less likely to be immediately missed. He'd used police databases, social media surveillance, and his position of authority to gather intelligence for the trafficking network. Agent Kim presented the evidence to Martinez in a conference room that felt smaller and more oppressive than before. Each document, each photograph, each detailed assessment of a potential victim represented not just corruption, but active predation by someone sworn to protect. "He wasn't just selling information," Kim explained. "He was actively recruiting victims. Some of these women were approached by uniformed officers who claimed to be conducting routine welfare checks or security assessments." Martinez felt sick as he recognized several names on Weber's target list. Women he'd encountered during other investigations. Women who had trusted police officers because society had taught them that badge meant safety and protection. The interrogation of Weber took place in a federal facility, with Martinez observing through one-way glass as agents worked to uncover the full extent of the trafficking network. Weber, represented by an expensive lawyer paid for by unknown sources, revealed nothing initially. But when presented with evidence of his communications with trafficking coordinators, Weber's resolve began to crack. The weight of decades in law enforcement had taught him to recognize when the case against him was insurmountable. "I never hurt anyone directly," he finally said, his voice hollow. "I just provided information. Information that led to women being kidnapped, raped, and sold." Agent Kim responded coldly. "Information that nearly got 3 innocent women shipped overseas as sex slaves." Weber's defense crumbled as agents revealed the scope of evidence against him. Financial records showed over $400,000 in payments from trafficking networks. Digital forensics had recovered encrypted communications detailing specific victim requests from buyers. Most damning of all, surveillance footage showed Weber meeting with known trafficking coordinators to exchange information and receive payment. The full confession came at 3:47 p.m., after 8 hours of interrogation. Weber detailed a trafficking network that spanned 12 states, involving corrupt officials in law enforcement, security companies, and local government. The operation had processed over 200 victims in 3 years, generating millions in profits for organizers and substantial kickbacks for facilitators like Weber. But even Weber's confession left questions unanswered. Who were the network's primary organizers? How many other law enforcement officials were involved? And most importantly for Martinez, how many other victims were still out there, trapped in the system Weber had helped create? As Weber was led away in federal custody, Martinez stood in the empty police station, surrounded by colleagues who now viewed each other with suspicion and shame. The institution they'd all sworn to serve had been corrupted from within, and rebuilding that trust would require more than arrests and prosecutions. It would require confronting the uncomfortable truth that predators could hide behind badges, and that the very people society trusted to protect the innocent could become the architects of their destruction. The case was closed, but the real work of healing was just beginning. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Denver buzzed with media attention as the trafficking conspiracy case reached its conclusion. Martinez sat in the gallery, watching as Judge Patricia Morrison prepared to sentence the man who had once been his trusted supervisor. Carl Weber had aged years in the months since his arrest. The confident lieutenant who had commanded respect throughout the police department now appeared diminished, hollow, wearing a prison jumpsuit instead of a badge. The prosecution's case had been overwhelming. Weber's cooperation with federal investigators had exposed a trafficking network that stretched from Colorado to international buyers, resulting in the arrests of 43 individuals across 8 states. But cooperation couldn't erase the damage he'd caused. Sarah Chen took the witness stand first, her voice steady but quiet as she described the trauma of captivity, the fear that still haunted her sleep, the way trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. "I trusted police officers my entire life," she told the packed courtroom. "I taught my daughters to find a police officer if they were ever in trouble. Now, I don't know what to tell them." Monica Rivera's testimony focused on the other victims, women who hadn't been rescued, women whose families still waited for answers that might never come. Her medical training had allowed her to help other captives during their imprisonment, but it had also given her clinical insight into the systematic dehumanization of trafficking victims. Jessica Walsh's words carried the weight of survivors' guilt. She'd been scheduled for transport to overseas buyers on the day of the raid, saved only by timing that felt more like miracle than police work. "Every day I wake up grateful to be alive," she said, looking directly at Weber. "But I also wake up knowing that my freedom came at someone else's expense. Other women weren't so lucky." The sentencing hearing revealed the full scope of Weber's betrayal. Financial records showed he'd received over $600,000 in payments from trafficking networks over 3 years. His victim profiles had led to the abduction of at least 47 women, with 32 still unaccounted for. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the courtroom's silence as she delivered Weber's sentence. Life in prison without possibility of parole, followed by additional sentences for each count of conspiracy, racketeering, and civil rights violations. "You perverted the sacred trust between law enforcement and the community," Judge Morrison said, her words echoing through the packed courtroom. "You used your badge not to protect and serve, but to hunt and deliver vulnerable women to predators. The sentence must reflect not only the severity of your crimes, but the betrayal of everything law enforcement represents." Weber showed no emotion as he was led away in shackles, but Martinez caught something in his former mentor's eyes. Not remorse, but the cold calculation of someone who had weighed the risks and chosen profit over human dignity. The other network participants received sentences ranging from 20 years to life, depending on their level of involvement. Several lower-level facilitators cooperated with ongoing investigations, providing information about similar operations in other regions. But the most significant impact was on law enforcement itself. The Denver Police Department implemented new oversight procedures, regular financial audits, and psychological evaluations for officers with access to sensitive information. Similar reforms spread to departments across the country as the scope of the conspiracy became public knowledge. Agent Kim, promoted to lead the FBI's new anti-corruption task force, worked with Martinez to develop training programs that would help officers identify signs of internal corruption before it could flourish. The trafficking network itself had been dismantled, its assets seized and converted into a victim compensation fund. But everyone involved in the investigation understood that other networks existed. Other corrupt officials waited to be discovered. Other victims needed rescue. Standing outside the courthouse after Weber's sentencing, Martinez reflected on the cost of justice. 3 women had been saved, a conspiracy exposed, and a network destroyed. But the price had been the shattering of trust, the recognition that evil could hide behind institutional authority, and the understanding that the fight for justice was never truly finished. The badges and uniforms that should represent protection had been corrupted by greed. Rebuilding that trust would require more than prosecutions. It would require a fundamental commitment to the principles that law enforcement claimed to serve. Weber's betrayal had ended, but its consequences would echo for years to come. 1 year after that October night, when 3 women vanished from a birthday party, Detective Martinez stood in his office, packing the last files from the case that had consumed his life and shattered his faith in the system he'd served for 2 decades. Sarah Chen had returned to work as a victim's advocate, using her experience to help other survivors navigate the complex world of law enforcement and legal proceedings. Her testimony had helped convict 12 additional network members, but Martinez knew the scars ran deeper than any courtroom could address. Monica Rivera had transferred to a hospital in Seattle, seeking distance from the memories that haunted Denver's streets. Her medical expertise in trauma care had been shaped by intimate understanding of suffering, making her one of the most effective emergency room physicians in the Pacific Northwest. Jessica Walsh had moved back to Colorado Springs, where she worked with a nonprofit organization that provided support for trafficking survivors. Her experience had taught her that recovery was measured not in months or years, but in the gradual rebuilding of trust in a world that had revealed its capacity for calculated cruelty. The 3 women had survived, but Martinez knew that survival and healing were different things. The trafficking network had taken more than their freedom. It had stolen their sense of safety in a world where predators could wear badges and authority could mask evil intent. The investigative reforms implemented after Weber's conviction had spread nationwide, but Martinez wondered if they were enough. How many other Carl Webers existed in law enforcement agencies across the country? How many other networks operated under the cover of legitimate businesses and corrupt officials? Agent Kim's anti-corruption task force had identified potential trafficking operations in 17 additional states, each investigation revealing new layers of systematic abuse and institutional betrayal. The scope was staggering, but the resources to combat it remained limited by bureaucracy and political considerations. Weber himself had been found dead in his federal prison cell 6 months after sentencing, officially suicide, but privately suspected to be elimination by network associates who feared his continued cooperation with investigators. Even in death, he'd taken secrets with him, leaving questions about network leadership and ongoing operations unanswered. Martinez's retirement ceremony was small, attended by colleagues who still struggled with the knowledge that corruption had festered in their ranks for years without detection. The speeches praised his dedication and investigative skills, but Martinez heard the unspoken truth beneath the platitudes. The institution they all served had been forever changed by the recognition of its vulnerability to infiltration. Walking to his car after the ceremony, Martinez encountered Tom Weaver's widow. She'd attended every court hearing, seeking answers about why her husband had been killed for trying to do the right thing. The official investigation had concluded that Weaver's death was retaliation by network associates, but no additional arrests had been made. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked Martinez, her voice carrying the weight of unanswered questions and unfinished justice. Martinez considered his response carefully. The trafficking network that had taken Sarah, Monica, and Jessica had been dismantled. Weber and his associates had been convicted, or killed. But he knew that demand creates supply, and as long as wealthy predators were willing to pay for human suffering, new networks would emerge to meet that demand. "This particular nightmare is over," he told her honestly. "But there are others. There always will be." Mrs. Weaver nodded, understanding the truth that Martinez couldn't bring himself to fully articulate. Her husband had died because he'd tried to expose evil that most people preferred to believe didn't exist. The trafficking network had been defeated, but the conditions that allowed it to flourish—corruption, institutional blindness, society's willingness to look away from uncomfortable truths—remained largely unchanged. As Martinez drove home through Denver's streets, he passed the industrial district where Sarah, Monica, and Jessica had been held captive. The buildings stood empty again, their windows dark, their secrets buried beneath layers of police tape and federal seizure notices. But somewhere in the darkness, he knew, other predators were planning. Other corrupt officials were weighing the profits of betrayal against the risks of discovery. Other young women were making innocent decisions that would put them in danger they couldn't possibly anticipate. The case had ended with justice served and victims rescued, but Martinez understood that it was really just one chapter in a much larger story. A story about the capacity for evil that exists within institutions designed to protect, about the price of corruption measured in human lives, and about the survivors who carry forward the burden of truth. That night, Martinez received a text message from Sarah Chen. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Some nightmares end because people like you refuse to let them continue." Standing in his empty house, reading those words by the light of his phone, Martinez realized that his 20-year career in law enforcement would be defined not by the cases he'd solved, but by the lives he'd helped save, and the trust he'd worked to rebuild. The 3 women who had vanished that October night had returned to the world forever changed. But they had returned alive, carrying with them the knowledge that even in humanity's darkest moments, there are those who will fight to bring light. Sometimes that has to be enough. If this story left you as impacted as it did me, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and comment your opinion below. Each comment is like a new piece that can help unravel other mysteries like this one. Because in a world where predators can hide behind badges and evil can masquerade as authority, it's our collective vigilance that protects the innocent. And somewhere tonight, that vigilance might be the only thing standing between another Sarah, Monica, and Jessica and the darkness that waits to consume them.